And welcome. So as you can see, we're working on trying to get this carpet installed into the truck, and the first thing we did per the manufacturer was take this carpet out of the box, set it outside in the sun, let it bake in the sun for a couple of hours to be able to get where you can kind of see it's been formed to fit certain lips, like the very back of the seat that you see there, as well as, because we kind of rolled it out from the back, matched up this form back here as best we could, rolled it forward, and matched up the front forms where the front seat goes, because you got a hump right here where you've got that piece of body that goes across, and try to basically roll the front of it that you see here up so we could get these to match up and give us a good idea of where we need to start cutting this carpet to get it to lay flat. Because you could see that when it came from the factory, they gave you plenty of extra, and none of this stuff, is cut to stop it, to account for that there's a dash here, that the carpet's not going to be able to go up underneath the dash. It has to stop at this point. But you can kind of see where the front bracket lines up. It kind of lines up where their foam stops on each side. So what we need to do is probably come in about that far from the foam on each side, cut it down the front here, basically turn this into a flap, and at least get it to the point we can get the fronts, driver and passenger rolled forward, and then we can go from there. Because like I said, it is molded as an extent, as you can see, but they didn't do any of the punching out of bolt holes for the seats, the wiring harnesses, or the control modules in here that aren't normally covered up with factory carpet. But we don't want to start cutting holes into this to account for wiring or any wiring or any of the seat wiring until we know we've got the carpet in somewhat centered and in place of where it needs to be, so we don't inadvertently cut something we don't need. So that's kind of how it looks like the easiest way to do at least this particular model is let it lay in the sun, let it get warm. You'll start to see again this rear form show up. Put the rear form in first, rolled it forward, rolled this front part of it forward so we can account for it and at least get this piece to line up and this form to line up, and then we can start cutting our center out here. So we're going to do that next, and we got a piece of cardboard underneath of this. Wife's suggestion to make sure when we're cutting through this piece of carpet, we don't inadvertently cut through the carpet that's going to stay. Just be careful when you're doing this, because obviously we've got our wiring harnesses underneath here, and we don't want to inadvertently smash or cut a wiring harness while we're underneath here doing all of this. With that being said, we're gonna again cut this center flap, get it folded out of the way, and at least get the rest of the carpet to fit underneath the driver and passenger footwells. And then now the manufacturer did say they did cut this carpet wide. You're gonna have excess material on left and right, because you can kind of see how well it overlaps where the normally kick panels needs to be. So we're also going to have to come in here once we get the carpet where it needs to be and also trim the sides up. So like I said in their instructions, they say go slow, be careful. So we're going to be at it for a bit. When it comes time to cut out the bolt holes where the seat's going to be, I got a little trick for you. I'm going to show you with that. We're not going to use a utility knife. We're actually going to heat up probably about a 1/2 inch or bigger size bolt and just burn it through the carpet. That way it cauterizes and melts all those threads together so it doesn't unravel later, and gives you a nice clean bolt hole to use. But we'll show that to you when we get to it. But I'll bring you back in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. So we can see we're kind of getting things laid out here, and you can see the center flap that we trimmed, which allowed us to work a little bit on our driver's side and get it to fall into place. And what I'm finding as I'm trimming this, at least so far for the initial cuts, is that just coming up to right about or just shy of where they stopped with the foam backing so far seems to be proving a pretty good area to trim this, to get everything to kind of lay where it needs to lay. Because you can see we're here on the passenger side, we've got the carpet where it's been pre-formed around the center hump, it's in place, and the back is kind of falling more and more in place. It's just kind of, it sits there. So we're going to continue to, again, just kind of trim on this excess piece prior to hitting the backing here, and just kind of continue to trim on this and get everything kind of molded and forced into place. And I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So just to kind of show you what we're doing here, again, we're just trimming the excess piece prior to hitting the backing, insulated backing. Now there are a couple areas that we did have to trim far enough in that we trimmed a little bit of the backing off, but for areas like this where you see it's kind of a tight corner, we're just taking the carpet and rolling it forward, basically tucking it in on itself like that, and then taking it and then pushing it into position and letting it roll. Oops, sorry. Letting it roll the rest of the way out, and just being mindful of areas like here on the passenger side where there is a vent. Right there, we want to get the carpet up underneath. You can see it corner right there. I'll get you a light here in a second, but then just pressing the rest of the carpet out. I'll get you a light in here so you can kind of see a little bit better what I'm referring to. They do give you ample, plenty of extra material on this carpet. So there we go. So you can see that we kind of rolled that carpet up and pushed it so it was underneath that vent right there, so we weren't blocking it. Got it underneath their ductwork, and you can see after we trimmed it where we kind of ended up in the passenger area here. So it's high up enough, it'll be out of the way. You can see over here on this side we did trim this back a little bit to where we got into the insulation, because remember on this side you've got a big old kick panel that covers this entire area up. So I was just kind of getting the carpet out of the way of that panel, just so it wouldn't kind of bother anything when that panel goes back in place. And you can see we can just tuck that carpet underneath that wiring, and just kind of working it this way, getting everything situated, making sure that you can see this defined a lot better now, but just making sure that as we work from this way forward or this way backward, that we're using this molded section right here, which is part of the frame rail for the front seat, using this as our reference to get the carpet to, you know, lay flat and push forward. So we've got to continue to do the edges like this, and then once we get all the edges done, we can come back and, you know, make little accommodations to pull our wiring harnesses through and seat belt bolts and things of that nature. And I'll show you what I was talking about. That's the side kick panel, and you can see how wide that piece is. And once we put that back in here, you can see this, once it snaps back into place and we push our wiring back in, you can see where that'll all get covered up. So we just want to make sure that when we cut it, we leave enough carpet on the edge that we catch the carpet here, you know, you don't see a gap. And that's pretty much the same thing we're doing for all of this. So that way, you know, when we put the center console in, which is why we came inward when we cut this center flap, because the outside of the center console is going to hit here, and we know we're going to overlap the carpet by about that much. So it'll look like a, you know, a nice, you know, tuck underneath. Console will sit here, you know, and you won't see, we don't want to come too far in, because if you come too far in, then you cut outside the edge of where the console is going to sit, and you'll see the floor underneath. So like I said in the instructions, just kind of pressing it all out, going slow with it. And of course, obviously we'll have to get a vacuum in here when we're done, but so far it's looking pretty good. I'll bring you back in a minute. Bye. And welcome back. You can see we're still in the process of getting kind of our carpet trimmed. For the sides, we'll probably have to trim this more, but for now, all I've done is just trim it back enough, as you can see here, just to clear the little hold downs the clips will press into. The center here since none of this was covered with carpet via the factory, we went ahead and just cut that square out to expose all this so it continues to stay exposed, plus expose our wiring harness over here, because, you know, in the event you have to troubleshoot something, you kind of, you know, need to be able to get to this equipment, which is why we kind of wanted to leave it uncovered just like factory. For our rear bracket, what we ended up doing here was just kind of sliding the rear bracket in place, notching the carpet enough to basically tuck it underneath, as you can see here, because we need this bracket to set flat against the body when we put the bolts in. So that's why we, you know, did that there, and just notched the sides of it enough to kind of peel this back, put this down, and then just lay our carpet down on top of it, because we know the rear console comes out to probably about here or so, this much further back than where the bracket's at, so we know we're good there. And of course, you know, we know that we're good from, you know, this point down, as far as making sure that we don't cut too far this direction that the console won't cover it. But we've got everything exposed that we need to have exposed. We got our wiring pulled through for our seat and the driver's side. And all I'm doing here to gauge where this needs to be cut is just reaching underneath, finding where the wires come off of the main harness, and then making a star cut close to that area, but obviously behind here, because from here forward, obviously the front of the seat, from here back is the back of the seat. So just kind of eyeballing it where it hits the factory harness and where our ends are at, and making a little bit of a star cut, and then just poking our wiring through for our seat. That'll get that to lay nice and flat at this point. Good. Yep, got it. So we've got that through for our wiring. You know, we still got a lot more trim work to do. We did do the trim work on the other side. Again, same process. Now, once we put our side pieces on, that side piece, as you can see, has got a pretty good overlap on it. So that's where your lockdown pin is going to be, where it locks into there. And you can see the bite on that from the pin forward is what, probably about a 1/2 inch from here to here. So if we need to, we could potentially come back and trim the carpet probably about halfway between this point. In other words, right here on this wire channel, we could probably come down right in the middle of this wire channel and continue to trim this carpet if needed, and it still have enough of an overhang to catch. But that's what we want to be mindful of, that we're not trimming so far back that when we go to snap this in place, you know, you see an exposed body from this point because there isn't enough carpet to go underneath here. So again, just slowly but surely doing things like this, getting our wiring poked through, getting this poked through so it wasn't holding the carpet up, so it allows this to kind of, you know, push down like this and start to lay flat. We cut some notches back here. We cut out the excess carpet that was hanging over the edge here, that was not allowing this to mold into this edge. And then we cut some slits that you can see there, so that way we can take these edges, fold them over, get them to round over this edge real well, and that way when we push the Christmas tree clips in to hold those edges in, they'll roll over nicely and secure. These right here, as you can see, even on this area up against this columns, we trimmed it back a little bit, but not too excessive. Again, it's easier to subtract than add if we have to when we're snapping our plastics back in place. If we have to trim more, we'll definitely trim more. But we also went ahead and cut this piece off. As you can see here, that was that center flap that we cut that allowed the carpet to push forward to fall into place. And I just left from here back here carpeted. I mean, I think on the factory one, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's actually split down the middle, but I don't see a need in splitting that there. I think just having this here where we can get our bracket on and off is fine. It's good enough. So now we've got our wiring through, and we got a pretty good job of getting our carpet where it needs to be. Then the next thing will be is going through and finding all of our bolt holes. For instance, this one right here, which I've got my finger on underneath the carpet, and getting it to basically poke through, or finding a way to figure out where the indentation is at well enough to then poke something through this. And like I said before, what we're going to do is we're going to heat up either a sacrificial big old soldering iron bit, or we'll heat up like a 1/2-inch bolt and just kind of push it through the carpet, and that way it'll kind of, you know, seal up and burn the edges and keep them from fraying. For instance, that one right there is the seat belt, the lower seat belt bolt. So if I put my finger on it, kind of make a note of where it's at, feels like it is right there. That's where it's at. So if you just kind of press hard enough with your thumb, you can feel the indentation of where those threads are at. And then what we can do is we can poke a small screwdriver through there first, or a sharp implement through there first, like maybe an awl or a seam ripper, and just verify we're in the right spot, and then we can just, you know, melt through it the rest of the way. So that's where we're at. We're just going to continue to work on this and get everything folded and cut and trimmed. And as you can see, yes, we'll have some vacuuming to do, because we did have to cut the foam insulation back in a couple of spots, because we did get into the foam when we did this piece here, and a piece on the driver's side that we also did. And I deliberately went a little bit excessive on the trim on this one to show you, and I got my reasoning for it. Is over here on the driver's side, you can see the gas pedal. I completely cut the carpeting away from the gas pedal, because what was happening was, if we pushed this down and went to wide open throttle, aka, you know, full throttle, it wasn't allowing the pedal to go down all the way, because it was hitting the carpet and the carpet was bunching. So again, for safety reasons, you can see that's been cut out almost completely around it, because we're also going to have a WeatherTech floor mat underneath here as well. So, you know, keep that in mind. So we trimmed up the insulation, as you can see, underneath of it, just so you didn't see it sticking out of here in the edge. It looks a little bit more like a kind of like a carpeted edge or factory edge. And I may trim off just a little bit more on this corner to get it away from the very bottom of this gas pedal. But again, for safety reasons, we don't want the carpet to bunch up around either one of these pedals and cause us an issue. Yeah, I may, as you can see there, I may come in here right where this curve is at and just come down and then around and just cut this corner out, so that way the carpet will lay flat right where I'm pushing up here in the corner of my fingers. Because again, we're gonna have a WeatherTech floor mat in here anyway, so you won't see that edge. And you can see we're just making cuts where we need to make cuts to give it the carpet to lay correctly. Because again, we're gonna have a trim panel here, so it'll cover up this side, and you won't see much, if any, of that edge. But that's where it sets. That's where we're at. You can see we've done a little bit of trimming on this edge as well, just exposing enough just to expose the clips. Now granted, it's not a perfectly rulered straight edge. I'm not concerned with it being a perfectly straight factory type edge, but again, there's enough of an overhang there that when we snap the trim in place, you won't see this little bit of a crooked edge on here. So with that being said, we're just going to continue to work on this, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So what you're seeing down here on the lift, we're just getting everything ready. This is a new tool for this channel. Had it for a while, but haven't had a need to use it quite yet. Originally bought this for in case we ran into a bolt that was so rusty we needed to heat it up. And in lieu of buying a torch, I ended up picking up one of these a few years ago, and it's what they call a flameless heating system, aka what it is, it's an induction heater. And you can see by the coils that come in the kit here, You got various different size coils for different size fasteners. And we got a fairly small coil on here now. And again, what this is, as you can see it there, they just call it a fanless heating system, mini induction. Basically, it's an induction heater, much like an induction cooktop is, in which what they're doing is they're using a magnetic field to introduce a current into a piece of metal, and thereby producing heat. Actually, I shouldn't say current. That's probably not the correct word, but it is inducing, basically, it's a big old, magnet, for lack of a better word. And what's going to happen is we're going to take a Ferris screw, aka one that is magnetic. I'm just going to verify that, yep, that's definitely one there. Just using a flashlight base as a test. And this is just an old bolt. So, and the back here, just to try to test this, this is the back ridge of our carpet. Remember, we took the old one out. It had a series of these Christmas tree clips that just pushed through holes of the carpet and then went into a hole in the metal lip underneath. So what I've done is just take a position where one needs to be and just poked it with used a small flat blade screwdriver and just kind of poked a hole in it to mark it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use our induction heater to heat up the end of this old bolt till it gets nice and hot, and then use this to melt a hole in through the carpet where that needs to be, so we can then, push our Christmas tree clip back through, because there are a series of these clips that go across this back lip. And this same process should work for the remaining bolt holes that we need to put back into this piece of carpet. Now, there's another way you could do this. If you have a propane torch, then by all means, you could just heat this up with a propane torch. If you have a big enough soldering iron with a nice big tip on it, a sacrificial tip, because it's going to be pretty, messed up by the time you melt a bunch of holes into carpet fiber with it, then you could use a big soldering iron to do it. So I figured, since we had this induction heater, might as well just kind of use this a little bit, see how well this will work for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you set up on a tripod, and we're going to work on heating this bolt up. What I'll do is, actually, I'll show that to you. I'll set you up with the tripod here. We'll heat this bolt up, and I should be able to keep the bolt hot enough to move the tripod and show you up here and kind of show you burning through the carpet. If not, I'll set the tripod up for the second shot, come back here off camera, heat the bolt up, and bring it up to you. But let me get you set up here. Now, this is an electromagnet, so hopefully it doesn't play too much with the camera view here. Oop. You guys almost fell over. Okay. So all I'm going to do is activate this unit and just stick the end of this bolt inside this field coil. And you can see that we're already getting hot. It's probably hot enough, and you can see that bolt is smoking. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move you up here. You can hopefully see this. You'll have to forgive the camera work on this. Yeah, this bolt stinks. It's nice and hot. So I'm going to go back underneath. I'm going to heat this bolt back up just as you saw. Let me get you some light up here. And then we're going to remove our screwdriver as it's marking our hole for us, and we're going to attempt to burn this through. Give me 1 moment to heat this bolt back up. And since this bolt is hot, we just want to be careful that when we're done with it, we don't lay it back on the carpet and burn a hole where we don't want to burn a hole. So I'm going to take our screwdriver out. There's our hole our screwdriver was in. And we're just going to burn through just like that. And you can see what we're left with. A nice cauterized hole burned through our carpet that we can then just take our little Christmas tree clip and push it right through. Again, it gives you that nice clean look without you know, potentially cutting it too big with a razor knife, or cutting it, having it fray, and so on and so forth. Now, we're just using a bolt in this case because it gave us a nice, you know, a nice diameter to meet our Christmas tree clip. But what we can also do for the other bolts, since we have access to a parts truck and extra bits and pieces, we can just use an extra seatbelt bolt to match the diameter for the other holes that we need. Or if you're like me, you have a pile of old drill bits, what you can do is just take one of sufficient size, if you've got an old drill bit that does it, and just use the shank end that would normally go into a drill, and just use that end up and heat it up. As long as it should work with any ferrous base, again, ferrous meaning magnetic, it should work with any magnetic type metal that you might want to use inside the coils of that induction heater just to heat it up. And you saw there, that was only a couple of seconds, and it got this bad boy to the point it was smoking hot. Now, it wasn't red hot. You obviously didn't see it turn color, but, you know, hot enough to easily burn through this section of carpet here. And again, just to show that to you, you end up with a very, very nice fastening hole. So we're going to continue to work on that. We're going to continue to go through here again, just using our small flat blade screwdriver to poke through it to mark where we need to be. And then we're going to go through here and just put the rest of the fasteners in. And eventually, once we get them all in, then we'll come through here. We've got to come down here. Sorry, don't mean to blind you with the light. We had to come through here, this piece, and we got to cut this hole back out to put our cup holder back in. But anyway, I thought you might get a kick out of that, to show you that it's an option where if you need to heat up a bolt for whatever the purpose may be, even if it's to potentially heat it up to get it nice and hot to break it free due to rust, that it's an option that you can pick up one of these induction heaters, handheld induction heaters, in lieu of needing, you know, access to like an acetylene torch, something along that nature. And I'll put a link in the description below, and link in the video description below, sorry, to the Amazon link that I used when I ordered this one. With that being said, we're going to continue to work on this, and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our area back here finished up. Let me show you that. That's where we were going through and putting in our Christmas tree clips, at least on the back here. Got that all situated. I cut a couple of reliefs, as you can kind of see one right here, at least on the curves of this on both sides, just so this carpet would conform nicely to the bend that you see here. But so far, that little trick of heating up an old bolt with that induction heater and pushing it through is doing a really, really nice job of creating a hole in here, and kind of cauterizes it. Because if you try using like a regular drill bit, you can run the risk of snagging the fiber underneath and then pulling the fiber and then ending up with kind of a long line that then runs down your carpet. So we kind of moved on to at least doing the first seat belt bolt on the passenger side. And as you can see here, just made the hole a little bit bigger than what it was needed, but it was fine. And using an old seat belt bolt out of the 2010, just for the sizing. So as you can see here, you know, this buckle has a little tab, little locating tab that would normally go on the body. So it's going to fit in there like this, and then get tightened down. As you can see, once we get the seat belt itself tightened down in there, it looks like it'll be fine. Yeah. Now, originally the factory carpet actually had this area trimmed out. They had like a little triangle shaped area completely cut out of the carpet, where this one was bare. And I think that may have been just to make sure that that locating tab seats down inside that body and kind of keeps this from turning. See, right there, it's caught on the tab. So I think it'll be fine to not trim the entire carpet around this piece. I'll try it like this, and if we go to tighten things up and it doesn't kind of look right, then I may just cut this section out. But for now, I'm happy with just kind of leaving this the way it is. Now I may heat that bolt up and kind of melt out that one last little section right there just to completely clear this mounting hole up, and then we should be good. So these holes are blind holes, meaning they go into a closed off section underneath the truck, and I'll show you that here. Let's see, they actually end up right inside of here somewhere. Let me get you some light in here. So that's the rear seat bolt for the front seat. So it's inside of this cross member, or this bracing piece, so you can't get to it. But here's another tip for you. But for the seat bolts that do go all the way through, that you need to make holes for, like the rear bolts for the front passenger seat, which is right here, what you can do is just get yourself a long enough screwdriver, poke it up through this hole, poke through the carpet, and that'll give you a really spot on location of where you kind of need to bore your next hole through to get your bolt to go through. But on these ones that are kind of encapsulated, like this bottom seat belt bolt that we just got done doing, I just did that in the same fashion as we did the ones back here, was just take a small screwdriver, kind of reach in underneath the carpet with your hand, figure out where your bolt hole is with your finger, to kind of line that up with the carpet, and just kind of push a small screwdriver through until you're through and you kind of have where your hole needs to be, and that'll let you know where you can kind of start melting, so to speak. As you can see, that's the reason why that one's a little bit elongated, because I was a little bit high when I first made it, so I just came back with the same bolt and melted an additional bolt size down below that. But again, as you can see, we got plenty of overlap with the seatbelt buckle, so you're not going to see any of that once it's covered. And that's what we're using there. So this is just the lower seatbelt bolt out of our parts ram, and of course, obviously, we got the garage door open, just providing ventilation in here, because the more of these you do and the bigger they do, you do accumulate material on this bolt that will start to burn off, as well as you'll get a little bit of smoke as you're burning this off. I guess what I'm saying is, make sure you get adequate ventilation. You probably don't want to be breathing these fumes in long term. And we're going to have to do the same thing to the fronts. Since the fronts are encapsulated as well, you can't get to the back of them to poke through. We'll just have to kind of feel our way to it, find out where that bolt needs to be, and then go from there. Now, another thing that you could do is that you could get your back seat bolt situated and literally just set the seat up in here and potentially use the actual seat as a guide, but that may be a bit cumbersome to pull off. It looks like it would be, just as easy to kind of, do this, or reach in like we've been doing to all of these. Reach in underneath here, figure out where your seat bolt is, which in this case it's kind of right here where you see me poking up through the bottom of the carpet, and then just use that as a gauge to kind of get started. Now, the factory carpet was pretty forgiving, as they had about an inch or so circle cut out of each one of these to make the appropriate space, because on this one over here, if I remember correctly, not only is there a seat bolt, but there's also a secondary hole for like a locating tab, much like there's a locating tab on these lower seat brackets. So I'm going to continue with that. We're going to get the rear seat bolt melted through next, because again, we can poke at that from underneath with a long screwdriver. It'll tell us exactly where it needs to be. We can do both rear seat bolts the same way, and then we'll come back and tackle the front ones, and I'll show you that when it's done. One moment. And welcome back. So we went ahead and got our rear bolts taken care of. As you can see here, oblonged out that one a little bit. Went with a slightly different method for using the rear hole. Since there's so much meat to play with on the feet of these seats, as far as what it will cover, as far as surface area, and you can see there you got quite a wide patch it's going to cover up, which is why in the OEM carpet there's a pretty, I was probably about a one inch or so, pretty wide circle that's cut into these. Ended up using this same type bolt, except now we're just heating up the head of this bolt and then just pushing it through the carpet. That way it gives us, you know, some wiggle room, because this carpet is going to shift and bunch, and especially as we put weight on it and start putting seats on it, the carpet may shift. So if you make your holes too spot on, then there's a pretty good bet that when you bolt the seat in, it could cause the carpet to shift and cause one of your other bolts not to line up. Or when we bolt the seat belt on, it could pull the carpet this way and cause them not to line up, which is, you know, I would assume even from the factory as to why those holes in the carpet is got so much forgiveness in them, is that it gives it that ability to kind of move and shift as it would, because yeah, I know things are created by machine, but you could very well get two templated pieces of carpet that aren't the same, or dimensions which were slightly off, and it would kind of account for that. But you can see what we're doing here on our passenger side. We're just getting things lined up where the holes need to be. So these are the two front bolt holes where they line up. And you can see as I push on the carpet and get it to lie flat, it actually moves the screwdrivers a little bit. So that's what I was talking about. Since we've got the extra real estate that the seat's going to cover up and you're not going to see underneath of it, we're going to make those holes obviously a little bit bigger than they need to be. Now on the passenger seat, it looks like the innermost foot has a locating tab that locates into a rectangular slot on this side. So that's what the top screwdriver is for. I looked and it doesn't look like there's a locating tab on the outermost one, just on the inner one. And when we do the driver's side, we'll have to, you know, take that into account as well. But it's no biggie. Even if you forget it, it's just a small tab. You know, a simple box cutter would do this. And to be fair, you don't have to go through the whole method of, you know, heating up something metal and kind of pushing it through the carpet. You could, you know, in theory, get away with a box cutter and just cut yourself a nice square opening to put the bolt in, just making sure that you're still within the area that it's going to cover, so you know you don't cut outside of that, and do just as good a job. I'm just trying this as a method, you know, to keep the carpet from fraying, you know, once it's cut. But with that being said, I'm going to continue to work on this, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So just to show you here, and again, the carpet's going to flex a little bit, and that's to be understood or understandable. You can see that we got a hole there for passenger front bolt 1. Sorry for the light. Passenger front bolt 2, and of course the little locating tab as well. And again, all we're doing, and albeit a little bit bigger than it needs to be, but we're just heating up the head of that old bolt this time, and just again just giving us some more surface area to work with and the ability for the carpet to move. Now as we're doing this, remember our wiring is on this side of this channel, but be mindful that if you're going to do it this method, that what I'm also doing is lifting the carpet up and then poking it through, letting it cool before setting it down, because you don't want to slip and inadvertently, you know, if you're doing this top one here, you don't want to slip and come through that way with something hot and potentially get underneath here and accidentally, you know, melt some wiring or something together. But that's everything on the passenger side here. And you can see that we did have one casualty, unfortunately. The bolt slipped out of my needle nose and kind of hit the carpet where it shouldn't have. But, you know, no harm, no foul. We're going to show you these kind of mistakes. We're not going to edit them out. But remember, we're going to have floor mats in here, so it's going to, you know, it's going to cover it up. Plus the back of the seat bolts here. So the back of the seat's going to cover a little bit of that up, but what it doesn't cover up, the floor mat will definitely cover up. So that'll be a mistake that only I and, you know, thousands of people, potentially whoever watches this video, is going to know is there. But what I'm going to do is let our induction unit cool down a little bit, let that bolt cool down a little bit. Now that we've got the passenger side done, then we're going to work on literally doing the exact same thing on the driver's side of it. Obviously, I'm not going to bring you back and show you that because it's going to just be a repeat of what you've seen here. But again, just to reiterate, this is what we're choosing to do, just to try to make it a bit cleaner, a bit neater. What you could also do very well much is just take, again, a standard pair of box cutters once you got your holes located, and just cut yourself a nice square hole around that mounting, around the mounting bolts. And at least on this particular application, there is enough of a metal of a footprint on those legs that even if you were to cut a square size hole in it, it would do a pretty good job of covering up, you know, where your bolts are going to go through once everything is seated. So we're going to take care of the driver's side, and I'll bring you back when that's done and show you what that looks like, and I'll bring you back in a moment. Well, a moment for you, but could be maybe about the 30 minutes to an hour for me. Talk to you in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got our holes done up here on our driver's side. We've got our seat belt holes, our rear seat bolt holes, as well as our two holes here in the front. We got one there, one down in there, and one right there for the locating pin. Because just like on the passenger side, it was the leg furthest in towards the transmission hump where that locating pin goes. So we got a little bit of work to do to get the carpet to finally sit where it needs to sit, and some of this settling will happen, you know, once everything's installed and the truck gets a couple of internal heat cycles on it as the summer months come upon us, and the inside gets up to a nice 130, 140, 150 degrees. It'll help, you know, smooth some of this out. But I think what I want to do next is get the center console in. That way it's the center console's in, and then we can work with the carpet towards the center, out towards the edges, and start putting our seat belts and all of our trim in. Because I think what I'll do is we'll cut it and call it a video at this point, and just consider this the carpet install, because the carpet, you know, obviously is here. We've got it mounted in the back with its Christmas tree clips that we showed you earlier, and we have it at least roughly trimmed on the edges. Now granted, we'll have to probably do a little bit more trimming on this to finish it up, but what I'll do is the next video I'll bring you back on. What we'll do is I'll have the carpet vacuumed ahead of time, but I'm going to get in here, vacuum up the carpet, get a lot of this fiber and stuff up that we accumulated while we're trimming, and then in the next video we'll do the center console install. We'll finish up the electrical wiring in the center console, and then once that's complete, then we'll come back behind ourselves and start putting our bolts in for our hardware and side trim. And then once the side trim's in, then the last thing that we'll drop in more than likely will be seats, because what I'm thinking of is it's going to be easier to deal with this side trim and get all our trim pieces in without the seats being in here. So I think that'll be the last thing that we drop in at that point. We still need to address our airbag wiring. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. I'll bring you along when we get to this point. I'm going to be using, you know, what is called quote unquote airbag eliminators, but I'll kind of show you what that is, and we'll test it and make sure that it works on this truck, or we may have to come up with something slightly different. But with that being said, if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Thank you to everybody who has thus far. We're still right on the crux of 1,500 subscribers at this point, and thank you to everybody who has subscribed thus far. And with that being said, I'll cut it and call it a video at this point, and I'll bring you back for the next one, in which we'll start working on the center console and finishing up its electrical. And with that being said, I'll talk to you later. Bye.